plus 1, n plus 2. With consecutive even integers, we want to set up something similar. So that would look like this. N, and then to get to 36, we would make it n plus 2, and on 38 would be n plus 4. Okay? And this is the part that I had troubles with. This next thing I'm showing you is what really just messed with me when I was in high school for a little bit, whenever I first had this, as a freshman. Because we didn't have Algebra 1 in 8th grade for us. But notice that when you had consecutive even integers, you have a difference of 2 between each even number. So it's n plus 2, n plus 4. What is the consecutive odds going to look like if 35 is n? Then to get to 37, you're going to go n plus 2, because how many units is it to get from one to the next? And then to get from 35 to 39, we go n plus 4. What messed me up was the fact that we were adding 2 and 4 on consecutive odds, because I was having a hard time understanding, for some reason, that the difference between an odd pair of integers is just 2 or 4, just like the evens. And so the n plus 2, n plus 4 works for consecutive odds or consecutive evens. And that just, I kept going n plus 1, n plus 3. Because I was thinking you had to use an odd to add to it. Yes, ma'am?
How do you know what n is? Like, how do you know that n is 35?
I was just starting off with some numbers. That was just given. Now, that's just 3 consecutive odds, 3 consecutive
Like,
n.
what kind of problem would they ask you?
We're going to do that. Okay. So anyway, we want to use n plus 2, n plus 4 when we see, where we're asked to find consecutive evens or consecutive odds. If it's just consecutive integers, we're still going to use n plus 1, n plus 2. So our problem today, find 3 consecutive even integers, and then it goes into this such that the sum thing. So our consecutive evens, and I'm going to give myself some room by putting, I'm going to have n plus 2, and n plus 4, because those are my consecutive even integers. Find 3 such that the sum of the first and second. So I'm adding n and n plus 2 together. And this would be in parentheses, but it's a plus sign, so I'm not putting it in there. Equals the sum of the third and negative 10. So the third plus negative 10, or you could just write that as minus 10. Simplify on both sides now. 2n plus 2 equals n minus 6. I'm going to subtract an n from both sides, subtract 2 from both sides. N equals negative 8. Is negative 8 an even integer?
No.
Yes. It's an odd number, but it's an even integer. So the first one is negative 8. The second one would be negative 6. Because the next consecutive is to the right. Visualize that number line. And then negative 4. So negative 8, negative 6, negative 4 would be 3 consecutive integers such that the sum of the first and second equals the sum of the third and the 10, and negative 10.
Could you go slower this time?
Slower?
I agree. Yeah, that was really fast.
Okay.
That was really simple.
Find 3 consecutive odds. We're still going to use n plus 2, n plus 4. Such that the sum of the first and third. So I want to add n and n plus 4. Again, I'm not putting parentheses around because it's addition. If it said the difference between the first and third, then I'd put my minus and put that third value in parentheses. I'm just skipping that step today. is 7 greater, so I'm going to cover up my 7 greater and just go to the second decreased by 18. The second number is n plus 2, decreased by 18, and then we tack on the plus 7 on the end. Am I going too fast yet? It was the solving part that I went too fast on?
Yeah.
Okay. Get your like terms together on each side. N plus n is 2n plus 4. And then we're going to combine these 3 terms. So that negative 16, negative 11.
Negative 11.
No, I may have done that wrong.
I got negative
It's, how about negative 9? With me to there.
Yep.
Now it's just solving. By getting your ends moved over to the same side and subtracting 4 from both sides. So this is just n. 2n minus n is n equals negative 9 minus 4 is negative 13. Is negative 13 an odd number? Yes. So the next consecutive odd would be negative 11 and then negative 9. And that's when I look back and think, this was the hardest stuff for me.
Why do you go
I think
down
because
one?
it was setting it up into those problems I had a hard time with too.
Why do you go down one? Why do you go
Think of a number line. Picture a number line. If we're getting greater, the next one,
If it's negative and the upside down?
you're still going to the right.
Yes.
Because we count from left to right.
You know how it's n plus 2 is negative 13, so negative 13 plus 2. That's how it works.
Good point too. Thank you. Yeah, you plug that negative 13 in to each of those, and that gives you the values. Yes, ma'am.
Why do you add a 2 and a 4?
You weren't in here when I first started. What is the difference between any 2 even numbers?
An even number? Or an odd number?
What's the value between, what's the difference between 16 and 18?
2.
And 16 and 20?
2. Or 4.
4. So the difference between those, to get from one to the next and then one to the next, you have to add 2 and then add 4. On your odd numbers, what's the difference between 23 and 25? Still 2, isn't it? Even though they're an odd number, the difference between those is still 2. And then to get to 27, you'd have to add 4.
Not 2.
So we use the n plus 2, n plus 4 for consecutive odds or evens. Because it works for each, because going from 23 to 25, you add 2. 23 to 27, you add 4. Find 4 consecutive odds. That's n plus 2, n plus 4, and n plus, class? 6. All right, the sum of the first and fourth, so n and n plus 6 is going to cover up to 25 greater than the opposite, so there's a negative sign, and then the third one I need in parentheses, and then put that 25 greater than on the end. So the opposite of the third means I have to keep that third one in parentheses until I distribute the negative through. Start simplifying now. 2n plus 6 is equal to, and then distribute the negative, just changes the sign of each. It doesn't change 25 because it's not in parentheses. 2n plus 6 equals negative n plus 21. Now that's a minus n, so I'm going to add an n to both sides this time. And I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides. That gives me 3n equals 15. and n equals 5. So if n is 5, then our next consecutive odd is 7, 9, and 11.
How'd you say that by myself? Yeah, I absolutely.
Good. Is there another one?
Do we have to do
Oh, this is just a different kind of problem. Lopez used a 5-iron, but the ball covered only 4/5 the required distance. If she hit the ball 112 yards, what was the required distance? This looks like stuff we've been doing. To me. Am I right?
Yeah, but it shows that we have to put it in a graph.
We don't have to put this one in a graph because it's not a percent.
Oh, well,
It's a
but
fraction.
In the thing about bringing this book, it has to be.
Okay, I'm not going to require that out of you. Let me make sure I'm looking at that I'm doing the right thing here. Yeah. They show the diagram for the fraction problems. I'm not going to expect that for you. We hopefully, I think I've discussed this. Tell me if I'm wrong. F times of equals is, and that the fraction and the is have to represent the same item.
Yep.
Okay, and the of is the
Other
original
first.
first number of time, total, starting number, all that kind of stuff. So we have the ball covered 4/5 of the distance. So I'm going to put covered, distance covered. Do we have that actual amount that it covered?
No.
She hit the ball 112 yards.
Yeah.
So isn't that the distance it covered?
Yeah.
So that would go over here. And then what's the required distance would be that idea of what's the total distance. What number? And then we multiply by the reciprocal of the coefficient, which is 4/5. So we're going to multiply by 5/4. 4 does reduce with 112 23 times. 28.
No.
4 times 6 doesn't give you a 2 though.
It's 28. 8 times
32 is 8, 28. Close. And then 28 times 5 would be 10 less than 100, or what is that, 150, so 140? 140. Right there. 30 times 5 would be 150, and then 8, 2 less 5 times is 10. Yes?
I did it a completely different way, but I got the exact same answer.
Okay.
I don't know how.
Don't say it.
Yeah.
Good job. Maccabee guessed that the total was 30 and 24 hundredths. But this was 7 and 2/10 times the total. What was the total? This is a decimal. Same idea. It's decimal times of equals is. We just have to figure out where these values go. Maccabee guessed that the total was that. So is that the total?
No.
No. That's not. So where is that going to go?
What number spot?
That's going to go in the of spot.
Oh.
Because that was the guessed amount. Right? That's what she guessed. If we want to know what the total was, that's asking for the total, so that has to go here. And the guessed amount was 7 and 2/10 times the actual total. So our decimal would be 7.2. Now we're going to divide both sides by 7 and 2/10. Let's say I let you use calculators. Would you use them responsibly?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, then you can start using calculators if you're not anyway. Right? But you do have to set up the problems like this situation here. This is what I'd expect to see on your paper, and then you're showing the division here, then you can use your calculator. So you use a calculator for the arithmetic, but you write down how you're getting to that. And then you can write 4 and 2/10. That would have been the actual total. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I have trouble like seeing which one to divide
You always
The
do
top is always the one you type in first.
Down here. What do you mean?
Yes.
No, not like that. Like, how do you know which one the...
Which one is the coefficient?
What do you mean?
If I had rewritten this problem, Heidi, like this. Which one would you divide by?
7.2.
Why?
Because that has the x, right?
It has the x by because x is the variable, the 7 2/10 is the coefficient. The difference is this just has a time sign instead of it just being implied.
So you
And
always do the one out here?
it turns out that way because of the way we set it up, yes. Yeah.
Well, I didn't... Like, I always get the right answer, but I was like, I don't know how. Because I had to do both, and then whichever one...
You usually probably take the fourth step of the problem solving and go, okay, does that answer make sense if I did it that way? Yes, it does.
That's what, yeah, I do that.
Okay. And that's what you should be doing to make sure that you're doing it correct.
Lesson. Assessments on Monday and studying this weekend.
Whatever.
No,
I just said
I
I
did
did
say
say
we haven't really learned, like, 'cause we didn't do any of the way we did last year, so I'm probably nervous.
We did last year, so I was really sad.
3/4 of the tickets had been sold. So if I just went through here and wrote this stuff out, just because that's the fraction that started with, 3/4 of the tickets have been sold. There were 420 tickets left. How many tickets were printed? Is that amount that's printed the total? So we're looking for the total, but the problem is this 420 isn't the number that was sold, is it? So that I can't put 420 in this spot without changing something.
Fraction.
Why do I need to change the fraction, Ethan?
Because that's not the right part of the tickets.
Okay. The number we have has to be the number we use here because there isn't anything else to use. That's the number that's what's left. Correct? So if you sold 3/4 of the tickets, what's the fraction of tickets you have left? 1/4. Kind of like if you had 30% were gone, how many are there type thing. Don't put a 3 back in there. Put the 1. Heidi, which one are we going to multiply by the reciprocal of?
1/4.
Okay, we want the reciprocal of 1/4, which is 4 over 1. 4 over 1. And what number equals 1680? So 1,680 tickets were sold. Or printed, excuse me.
I'm gonna go with it like that. I gotta finish mine. So good about 10 o'clock.
Problem set 77. 1 through 30. Well, we've only had one assignment in 2 weeks here. So due Monday. It's not like you didn't know we'd be doing one through lesson 77.